Hi, this is Ty from Side Character Quest. This is not a new episode, though I am currently editing the next quest, and I just did a session 0 for the quest after that. Exciting. I'm excited, personally. Instead, these are just a couple of quick announcements, followed by an episode of another podcast that I guested on earlier this year, and I think people will enjoy listening to. It's relevant. It is relevant to your interests. Trust me. So, announcement 1. SCQ. This podcast has just ordered 2 batches of new themed stickers. The first one is alluding to our good friend, Sir Roderick. We actually had an earlier edition of these stickers that were a little bit smaller, so I don't know if I ever shared those publicly, but if you've seen those floating around, it's the same design. It's a really cool design. I've heard very good responses to it, so I think you'll love it. It's great. The other sticker is referencing our good friend Leslie the librarian. It's Feather. It's Feather, her chicken. He's adorable. Both of these designs, by the way, are by Autumn, the artist who's behind all the SCQ stuff, except for the original logo, which was crap that I made. Me. Don't blame Autumn for that. Anyway, if you want either or both of those stickers for free, then just fill out the form that's going to be linked to in the show notes. If you can't find that for whatever reason, you can shoot me an email at sidecharacterquest@gmail.com. Announcement 2. I will be at PAX Unplugged in Philadelphia on Saturday, December 7th. I love Philadelphia. I'm glad I'm going to be there. I wish I could be there for a little bit longer, but, whatever. Life. I'm not going to be doing any special events while there. I'm just there as a guest. But if you want to say hi, shoot me a message, again, at sidecharacterquest@gmail.com, and we can meet up. We can say hi. I had some listeners do that last year. It was awesome. Yeah. All right. That's it. Now get ready to listen to me and Fiona from the DM's Book Club discuss a Dungeons & Dragons adventure designed to get people into TTRPGs. All right. Goodbye.
Hello, and welcome to the DM's Book Club, a weekly book club podcast where we talk about some Dungeons & Dragons and discuss how we might include them in our role-playing campaigns. With me, back again for the second time on DM's Book Club, is Ty. Hello, Ty. How are you?
Hello, Fiona. I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Well, it's been a long time since you've been here on this podcast because Ty is one of our friends of the show from Side Character Quest. And last time was at time of recording over 2 years ago. You came on and talked about duet D&D, one-on-one D&D. So how have you been since I last spoke to you? Obviously on this podcast, we've spoken in between that time, but how have you been so far?
Yeah, so I am a frequent appearer on the How Not to DM and What Am I Rolling Discord server. So you hear from me every once in a while on there. But yeah, I have been doing great. If life has been incredibly busy and hectic, and my appearance on actual play stuff has been a little bit light over the last couple of years, but that's because of multiple moves, various life events that I won't get into now because they're amazing, great, but also not the topic at hand.
No, not at all. But you can see Ty. Hopefully the VOD will be out. But Ty was very kind to appear on the Roll for Goods Solemn Veil one shot, which we did. That was the first time we actually played together. Or I ran a game for you, and that was quite exciting because I hadn't seen you do actual play, like a live actual play before. So it was obviously I'll say this now, obviously, and I would say it to you, not when we're not recording, but it was a joy to have you on there. Obviously,
thank you.
From what I understand from Side Character Quest, obviously I know you're usually the one in control, and then suddenly, lots of other things are happening around you. So
yeah, it's really exciting and great to get to break out of that experience of being the GM. I actually, over the last couple of years, while I haven't been able to do a lot of SCQ, I have gotten to do a couple of home campaigns that I've played in, a D&D campaign and a Blades in the Dark campaign.
Yeah.
And in both of those cases, I got to be the player for an extended period of time. And I feel like it has given me a lot of fresh energy to return to GMing. And when I ran a Forged in the Dark one shot for my family for Christmas. I have run a couple of other like one shots here and there just for home games. And I've been excited for that. And I've been excited to return to making stuff for SCQ thanks to my time getting to be a player in a non-published space.
I think people don't realize how important that is. Like, again, both you and I are content creators, and obviously we're both like versed in tabletop RPGs. I know like you've been looking into like designing your own sort of system for your podcast and stuff. And I don't think people realize that research, she says in quotation marks, that takes the form of reading, watching like media stuff like that, but also playing in games and being immersed in games that you aren't necessarily the creative director or anything like that. And so I do feel like whilst I'm very happy with the badge Forever DM and GM, I love when people go, oh, would you like to be a player? Oh, Fiona always likes to run the games. I'm like, no, I'm happy to play because then I can learn from a different style and different because everyone runs D&D so differently, which is an absolute joy. And I love being able to go, oh, that's really interesting, and then being able to test some of the things that we've talked about on this podcast about like, oh, what kind of like character I would like to play. Do I want to have it completely try a rogue? Do I want to try these things out? Because I get very excited and then I go, well, where am I going to use this energy? I don't know. I guess I'm going to have to make an NPC or something, Yeah,
I have a friend who, the GM of one of the games that I have been in the last year, who mentioned to me like, man, I really need to be a player in some stuff. And I was like, oh, why? Do you not like jamming? And he's like, no, I love jamming. I just don't understand what you guys get out of playing. Like, he was like, I can't conceive of why you guys would find what I make for you fun.
Interesting.
And he really wanted to get a chance to play just so he could figure that out.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I do think that sometimes where I again, and don't know about yourself, sometimes when I've run games at the end of it, obviously you feel mentally exhausted because you've played various people, you've run combat, etc., and you're like, oh man, I hope they enjoyed it. And they'll be like, yeah, we love that weird side character you came up with, and you're like, okay, that was just a mental fart that is now part of the thing, and I just was yes-anding and stuff like that. But it's very interesting, I think, like you said, like, how did you enjoy that session? All of these things went wrong, and they're like, yes, we love that, So.
Are you excited to talk about the starter set?
Always. Yes, today's topic is the Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, the latest starter set that is used for the current edition of D&D. Whether or not they'll do another one in maybe a year and a half's time is up to it. But this is effectively replaces the Lost Mines of Phandelver starter set that first came out with the 5th edition D&D. And yeah, I sort of propose this to you as a sort of something quick and easy to read. But also, I'm a big fan of like looking at quick starts. I run some streams about like Too Long Didn't Read and like getting into the nitty-gritty about like what makes people excited to play a game. And I find starter sets are an interesting way of packaging up a system and then giving it out to people to go, oh, okay, I could just run the system without having to read 400 pages of novel or setting or anything like that. So I was like, I actually didn't know anything about this starter set. So I was like, I know what I'll do. I'll enforce it on my good friend Ty and see what he makes of it.
It's funny because the last game that we did, First Blush, which was the 2-player game that we did, I read that as a 2-player game adventure. That's what I thought it was supposed to be. And I ended up leaving it thinking, wow, this would be a great tutorial for somebody to learn how to play D&D. I thought it was, maybe it was intentional, but it was accidentally a great starter set. I was actually curious. So what did you read in preparation for this? Because for me, I read the adventure bit and then I listened to the episode you did on the first starter set.
Fandelver.
A few years back. That's all I read. I didn't read any of those.
No, me too. Don't panic. Because what I will say is that there's a couple of booklets in here, and one of them is just a very basic, like, here's how to play the rules, and it's the exact same text they've used every time. It's basically placeholder.
Okay.
And it's fine. Like, it just basically encourages the GM to, like, improvise DCs on the fly. Like, you don't need to, it's an encouraging manual of about like 3 or 4 pages of like the basics that you need to know. And then there's some pre-generated characters as well. But other than that, I just read the adventure itself. And one thing I would say, because we haven't covered it on DM's Book Club, but in between that first starter set and then this one, there's the Essentials kit.
Oh.
It's like some sort of expanded starter set where you have like the first adventure and then like 4 more on top of it. So it's almost like a mini campaign. Mm-hmm, yeah.
Is it all like building straight off of Fandelver?
No, it's all different. So that one, the Dragons of Ice Spire Peak, I believe it's called. They're all to do with dragons.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the Essentials kit. I think what I realised now, which might seem very silly, that the first starter kit had nothing really to do with dragons. And then everyone after this has had something to do with dragons, to be like, we need dragons because it's in the title. We need to put the iconic creature in,
I have a question for you as well. I thought about this before I started reading. Mm-hmm. I thought, like, Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, what would I want to see out of this just in terms of like set pieces, like adventure set pieces? What would I think, like, this fun fantasy adventure definitely needs A, B, and C?
That's a very good question, because with a title like that, Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, you're like, so in my head, and I will admit from the cover image as well, I assumed it was going to be like a Jurassic Park style, like 2 dragons fighting each other, and you were stuck in it and you couldn't get out. That's what I assumed it was going to be.
Oh, that's really good.
And also, again, maybe this was very silly, but I assumed you'd be high level, because I was like, these dragons look really big. Maybe you're going to have to be like level 7 or 8 to fight like a young dragon or something like that. That's the impression I got, because you've got 2 sort of dragons facing off each other on the cover. That's not what you get at all.
No, not at all. Very much not that. Yeah, to answer my own question on this, I would want to see a few things out of it. I would want to see, like you said, a dragon battle. I would want to see actual dragons. I would want to have the chance to potentially befriend a dragon. Yeah. And on the terms of Stormwreck, I would want there to be a raging storm around this island. And then the wreck part, I would want there to be ships. Yeah. And if there's going to be ships on an island, I want there to be pirates. Yes. Like that's what I want out of this.
I think as well, the idea of storm wreck as well is that, there is a storm that you get wrecked on the island and then you can't escape from it. Again, not what happens, minus spoilers.
No, that is surprising. That didn't occur to me, but you're right. Yeah, we don't wreck. We land quite calmly.
You have to go to this place. What I will say before we continue is that obviously we will be spoiling this starter set. So if you're like, I can't wait to play it, maybe don't listen to this episode till after, because all we're going to do is do a bit of a critique about it and give away some of the spoilers. This whole the adventure itself is only about 4 chapters plus like a bestiary and some appendix as well in terms of magic items and whatnot. So it is quite a short starter set. I think you could get through it in maybe 2, maybe 3 sessions if you were just like gunning through everything. If you wanted to do a bit more role play or anything like that, then maybe it would take a little bit longer, maybe up to 6 sessions, which I think is roughly the length of a starter set, is that to get enough out of a story.
I feel like it was a good starter set length, short enough that, like you said, depending on how you get through it, you would still have the energy and desire to move on to something else.
Compared to, say, Fandelver, which I appreciate does have now this very privileged thing of being fleshed out into an actual setting, because in that particular starter set, there was a lot going on. Like, there was loads of locations that were dotted around in the area, like, and you could miss some of them. Here, you are on an island, the Stormwreck Island, as it sort of is in the title. You go there via boat. You meet all your friends going to boat, and you all have a reason to go here. And then all the quests are either on the island itself or nearby, which you can get through boat. So it's all very contained, which I think is, again, good for like maybe starting GM, so that they're not like, no, they've decided they want to go back to the mainland and they're just swimming across,
Yeah. I played Fandelver when 5th edition first came out, and I remembered it being a very long adventure. I haven't gone back to it in years, but I remembered it being very long. I remembered it having a ton of NPCs with complicated relationships, and I, at the time, had a really hard time parsing all of it, putting all of those pieces together and getting them locked in my brain well enough to actually run the game, despite, I did attempt to, but that was very difficult for me.
Oh, so you ran the game then?
I would say I ran 5 or 6 sessions before the thing petered out for reasons I don't recall.
Yeah. Scheduling, the usual.
Yeah. Nothing to do with like a fault of the campaign or the adventure.
No.
I found it enjoyable and fun. It was just difficult for me as a relatively inexperienced GM at the time to really just get a hold of all of those like pieces in my brain and be able to use them.
I've played through it as a player, and I think I agree with you because it's such a, when you sit down and you read it all, you go, oh, this is a great first campaign, but I feel like it took us, because I remember the GM at the time said, like, look, this is supposed to take us 6 sessions. We're on a year and a half of you doing it because we wanted to explore everything. We wanted to, we did chatting, we failed various things, and the GM obviously improvised and stuff like that. So
great value.
We loved it. Yeah, we got loads out of it. But like, I guess for the GM, that might have felt like, oh, we're still on the starting blocks. We're still in the starter set. We're not exploring. And now I feel like this, the Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, I feel like this is pared down enough to be like very bare bones, which people might find disappointing, but I feel like there's enough there that you can play together, get the basic rules down in a couple of sessions and go, oh, so this is what it's like. Oh yeah, I'll come back and play again next weekend. We'll have new characters. Yeah, whereas I think with the Foundelver set, you kind of stuck with those characters for such a long time that you're like, well, it would feel bad that we finished this adventure. We wanted to make new characters. You've already bonded with them. Whereas I feel these characters, certainly the ones, the pre-gens for the Stormwreck Isle, there was enough to be like, here's a reason why you want to go there. And that's it. You can make anything else up. Everything is customizable from then on. Let's get started then and talk about the overall structure of the adventure. So as we sort of said, you sort of arrive at this isle, you come and meet sort of the mentor, the main sort of NPC whose name I've completely forgotten, which is always not very good.
Lunara?
Nurara. No, sorry, say that again.
Runarna? Runara.
Welcome to
with
DM's Book Club.
Runara? That is totally from memory. I could be wrong.
No. But here's the thing: like you're probably right in terms of the spelling, but in terms of pronunciation, who knows? Again, my big complaint with all Wizard of the Coast books is that there is never a pronunciation guide, and I'm someone that always bottles out at fancy names, and I'll be like, Steve, Sarah.
Yeah.
I just, and I know that's the me thing. It's absolutely the thing. I should just try it and nobody else will question me. But I do think like if they had this like, hey, this is how you would pronounce it, or just a quick guide of everyone's names and location names, I think people would be like, oh, that's how you say it. And it doesn't, I guess, I don't know. We've been looking at some Eberron stuff and Keith Baker has said like, in terms of pronunciations, whatever you say works. And I'm like, Keith, that is not helpful. Because what I say is completely different to what Hamilton says. But you meet Runara, the person who's like the leader of the temple there, who has a very interesting backstory, is, again, massive spoiler, it's dragon in disguise. And there's history of like this island where there's all this dragon magic and dragons have died here, and it's just like this energy here means a lot. And then there's another rival dragon who was against her leadership, and they quarreled, and now this other dragon's hiding somewhere else on the island. And eventually the finale is that you face off with this dragon and rescue another dragon. So there's 3 dragons involved in this, which is more, 3 dragons for one starter set is not too bad, I would say.
Not too bad. And there's also a dragon imprisoned under the volcano. So there's a 4th dragon.
4th dragon, and you've got a whole host of characters who have interesting past, who have come to the temple, and each of your pre-generated characters has a reason to be there and has an answer. The leader of this particular temple will give them quests to go on to be like, you will find your answer here, and direct them to 2 big sort of points, either the Cursed Shipwreck or the Seagrow Caves, which would then lead up to a point where you're like, right, we've now got all that we need to go to the Clifftop Observatory to go and have this showdown with this other dragon. What did you make of sort of the general sort of structure as you said, as a GM coming to this?
I liked a couple of things about this. One is that the chapters 2 and 3, Seagrow Caves and then the Cursed Shipwreck, both of those felt like they had tons of stuff. Like they both felt like a plug and play one shot that you could hop into any D&D campaign in the center of it. and then pop out. And it would be a satisfying little adventure that you can use at any point. That's even true kind of chapter 4.
Yes.
You could go from chapter 1, you could skip straight to chapter 4. Basically, you could skip from the intro to the conclusion if you just adjusted the power levels a bit. You could do all 4 of the chapters. You could switch around 2, 3, and 4 into whatever order you want.
Yes.
It's clear the intended way is 1, 2, or 3.
Yes.
3 or 2. And then 4. But you could mix and match this so many different ways, which I think is great. You get use out of it, even if you are already familiar, and you aren't a starter.
I think what maybe been missing perhaps is having like an actual flow diagram, because I know stuff like in City of Mists and stuff like that, you have locations where you'd be like, you can go to these places. I mean, appreciate there's only 2 big locations, so it's a very simple diagram. But I agree, I quite like that you could do them in any order. Then it gave you advice like, if they're already level 2, add extra couple of creatures here to beef it up, or they should now be level 3, and giving that advice, but it wasn't like conductive for them to continue. It wasn't like a big wall saying, you can't go through here anymore. It wasn't like the invisible, like, you've not leveled up, so I guess you're going to have to kick your heels and talk to the NPCs and do some role play,
Can I ask you, how did you feel about the level up advice, where they basically just said, if your character is, this is designed for level 1 characters, if they're already level 2, then it was always just like add 1 extra body, or add 2 extra bodies to this.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think because for me, I'm someone who sucks at combat. I suck at combat so much, and I'm also bad at judging the levels as well. Because ultimately, the player characters, when they're created, they are always going to be they're always going to have an edge. They're going to have something extra to this. So in my head, I would actually just have the extra stuff that says, if they're level 2, add 3 things. I'll just add them in anyway. And then if they do something cool,
you just wipe them out.
Yeah, exactly. I think I appreciated it because, again, you and I are both experienced GMs of this, so maybe the advice, we don't need it. But I do wish it would say, like, hey, if they do think of a cool thing that's not combat related, because they just talk about it a little bit, but if it's like
near the end,
exactly, it's like they can bypass it. I think encouraging that, because it makes it more cinematic. It's just, and it makes you feel so cool that you managed to talk your way out of fighting the creatures that are affecting the myconoids, all that sort of thing.
Totally.
It shows that you are clever, I think, as players and enjoying the story. But I know that's not necessarily what D&D is about. D&D, unfortunately, is a combat system. So when you level up, you're going to get more powerful in terms of weapon attacks rather than social deduction or social persuasion, perhaps. The
one example I felt where adding an extra body, an extra baddie to fight against in the combat made things interesting in a way that was like specifically laid out in the book, was there's a fight against a harpy. And they say that if your characters are already level 2, then when they fight this harpy, add another harpy. And the 2 harpies don't trust each other. And your players could potentially convince them to get mad at each other and distrust one another and maybe fight each other so you guys don't have to fight them. And that, I thought, was like a great a way that, like, making the combat more interesting by adding additional combatants as opposed to making it more of a slog. Because I feel that the hardest thing for any new GM, in my opinion, is pacing, is making it so that they know when to end a scene, when to continue a scene. And D&D's combat is really, really hard to pace well. Very hard to pace well. And the more individual bad guys you add, the harder that becomes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the advice of, you're a brand new GM, you need to make this combat more difficult, add more bad guys, that's just going to make the combat more boring. More boring
and more difficult for you if you're already struggling with trying to work out action economy and stuff like that.
Exactly. Now, granted, with the exception of, like you said, where using some easy to kill enemies to make it a little bit more exciting, that's totally valid and fair. But that's not advice it gives.
No, but I think it's true, because it's something that in my head I'm very okay to do that now. I'm very good to be like, there's a call that's coming, and then the NPC you rescue goes, "Don't worry, I'll stop them. And then it's like, cool, I don't have to worry about that NPC fighting. And they're just plot armor, but they're away from the fight that you're currently on. So it lessens
awesome,
that.
yeah.
That's the thing I think of there. I think ultimately, yeah, I agree. I love having alternate ways to like end combat and stuff like that, and give the players that they are cool and that they don't, like you said, it doesn't become a slogfest. Because again, not only is this for obviously new GMs, but also for new players as well. So if they're looking at their thing going, oh, what spells do I have? Because I know there's like a cleric and I think there's a wizard as well. And so you just start going like, oh, spells and then fighting and the rogues there as well. So I would, out of interest, because this place does have maps, would you, because you're not a GM that usually uses maps for your combat, do you? It's more theatre of the mind.
Mm-hmm. Correct. So you're wondering if I would use these maps?
These maps, particularly for first-time players.
That's a good question. I feel like if it was brand new players, I think that if I had a feeling that I had people enraptured, then I would hold back on the maps when I'm describing the scene, setting all of that. But as soon as people seem confused, or if they don't seem like they're like grabbing, like, oh, they're not actually seeming that into it, then I would pull out the maps to be like, hey, look, picture this in your mind. Clearly, my description is not giving you anything not helping. So I would redirect to that.
Then my second question on top of that then is, because I think you're absolutely right. Would you play this starter set then? If you got the starter set, whether it's digital or physical, is your first thought, and I appreciate, you make content that's usually remotely and you play in person. Would you, if you were introducing this to a new player, and you had the starter set, would you prefer to play it in person or online?
Oh, definitely in person.
Yeah.
I find that when you have people in person, there is a different energy. There is an ease in getting people to lock in. You can more specifically control the vibes of the area, making sure that the lights are turned down, not oppressively. You've got like a sort of low level ambiance going in the background of music or sound effects, or just kind of like just peacefully. It's not even necessarily related to what's going on. It's just kind of setting the mood of, hey, we're having a fun adventure time. Pay attention to what's happening here. And if people have traveled to your home to play this game, I feel like that also helps them lock in a little bit more.
Yeah.
If I was playing with, experienced players, or if I had no choice, which happens, then I would happily run this online. And I think that having those digital maps that that you can get from this would be really helpful. But otherwise, if I had my choice with some brand new players, definitely in person.
I think I agree. And it's the same reason that you're sort of hinting at. I do think starter sets, there's something like I've run loads of different starter scenarios, Alien, I'm looking at some like Call of Cthulhu, all that sort of thing. And I've done them online. But it's something about having the physical starter set where it's just like the physical adventure in front of you, the map is there. People have their character, like it's a board game, right? It's all in one. And so I do feel there's something tactile about it. So I definitely very much appreciate, like I'm looking at all my starter sets over there going like, they will never get played, but I've looked through them and gone, this is a really good starter set. So I always do think like starter sets, as long as they're accessible online, that's absolutely fine. But I do think they encourage people to go and meet in person and play in person. And I think, like you said, we get so much more enjoyment. As I do think like in person and remote gaming has pros and cons, absolutely. But there's something about starter sets where I'm like, we need to play this in person because, like you said, the vibes are right. You can help with rules straight there, and you can actively see people engaging. Like that's the thing as well. You're saying
you can hand each of the new players a D20 from your collection and say, for this session, this is you. And just that, I feel like having that little physical trinket to like lock in on your character is such a powerful thing. Yeah. I think the in-person bit of it can't be ignored.
I think we're both agreed. Like, there's no right or wrong in terms of which one to do at all. And certainly when you're beginning, but I do think, because I know sometimes when you're beginning and you're playing in person, that is kind of scary because obviously you're acting in quotation marks. But I feel like something like this, because the adventure is so straightforward, so simple. You can't get lost. And again, short booklet, so you can look through it quite quickly as well. Compared to that previous starter set, which had, as you said, a whole wealth of stuff where you could get lost easily in it. I would feel more comfortable as a new DM for playing it for new people and people getting in on board and excited, and hopefully be willing to come back week after week to finish it off after 2 or 3 sessions as well. What did you think of the ending?
I found it a little like it is not much of an ending, which I think is on purpose.
I agree. Yeah.
It ends at a very just, there is this combat with a blue wormling, and the wormling like does a WYRMLING, not WORM. The wormling has this like big it's trying to perform this big ritual. You defeat it, and then I don't think Runara even ever has to reveal that she's a dragon, does she? That's interesting.
Reveals it early on as she gains the trust of her, but I don't think you have to ever reveal.
Yeah, I
think it's like she is this dragon, so maybe if there was some questioning or from the players or sort of, I agree. But I will say, the Spark Render is this character's name, this sort of evil blue dragon, which is, I love the name of it, it's great. But I will say so when he talks about running the chapter and he gets to the final sort of boss room, Spark Render is asleep, and it tells you could easily just stealth past it and go and rescue the other dragon, and then it talks about this big ritual, so if it happens to wake up, I'm like, wait, hang on, that doesn't seem cool.
The ritual sounded so fun, so much more fun. Like I was reading this all in order, and I read through the whole, sorry, I'm jumping ahead of you.
No, go for it.
But I read through the whole description of like, here's how you could sneak past it. Here's how you could do like a one-on-one fight if you accidentally fail to stealth it. Here's all of this stuff. And I was like, oh, that's, okay, that all makes sense. That's pretty good. And then they described the ritual fight, and I'm like, that's so much cooler.
Yeah,
that's 100%. So much cooler. And I'm like, man, oh boy.
100%. I would absolutely just skip those first 2 bits, like sneaking past it to rescue the other dragon.
Yeah.
And if you wake it up, I would get rid of that bit completely and just have the ritual, just because it's cool. It's much more like, and you can have hints about it happening, like, oh, a dragon keeps appearing, like when you go to the Sea Grove, it's like, oh, it's because this dragon came and did something, or something got stolen from this wreck of the ship that we went to. Oh, that's because this dragon was there. And like, because there's no real hints about what this dragon is doing until right at the end goes, big bad is coming, and you're like, what? Okay, what? I guess we'll stop it. So it does feel like if you play as is, it is a bit of a non-ending, which I'm a bit like, because your players aren't going to go in quietly. They're heroes. They want to prove themselves.
On the note of non-ending, though, there was something that I particularly liked about the setting of the starter set, and that is the fact that it is on an island, on the Sword Coast. So I'm a person who generally veers away from pre-written settings. I like my homebrew settings. I feel like the fact that this starts on an island means that you could then immediately go into the Sword's Coast, the nearest bit of the Sword Coast. You could go up or down the coast, go like start your adventure somewhere else. Maybe because a storm has swept you off your path, you've ended up somewhere you didn't expect. You could end up in a different, pre-written island adventure, or you could leave this island, leave D&D's setting, and go entirely to your new homebrew setting that it's like a different continent so far away. And I love that this is a starter set that makes it so easy to plop this island in the middle of wherever you want it to be.
Well, it's exactly what you said about like the sea-grown coves and the shipwreck islands. That they are self-contained adventures. You don't need to know before and after. You just, the Sea Grove coves, decided something's wrong in the underground bits. Something's happening there. Well, we'll go investigate it because the town is falling sick, or the water's been polluted, and you go and there's a thing with myconids. Great. You're treasure hunters. You're scavenging. There's a storm wreck, and you you hear that there's some harpies nearby, and then suddenly waterlogged zombies come back. Like you said, it's very much like you could just pick it and just go plop, put it somewhere as a again. I think it's modular.
Yeah, very modular.
Right? You could be like, okay, we're only going to have one session. All right, well, I will take the shipwreck, and then just use, here are the characters. You've been sent on a quest from the Stormwreck Isle, and just do that bit. You don't need any of the context from that. And I just think that's it's a clever thing to do, is to get people into it. And I agree. I feel like the setting itself, with a little bit of backstory about like what dragons do. I think the one thing I would do is let people know at the beginning, when I was sort of doing the introductions, like what this island was about. Like there used to be dragons here, and because you don't really know what the Isle's for or what its history is, but I would just say it as just group knowledge of like it's known for fights between the dragons and metallics and chromatics, and then this fight, and maybe there's less dragons now, but there's the scar of magic, and it's been claimed that there are dragons hidden beneath still, etc. And I think just having that for the players to play on, to know, and maybe go, wait, there is a dragon, even if you never say dragons of Stormwreck Isle, you're like, roll credits, that sort of.
Yeah, I think that would be a great way to like get people excited and scared, and nervous about things. Oh, speaking of scared, and I know that you're a big fan of like horror gameplay, and I know you have mentioned myconids just in passing several times through this. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts of like how you would run that, because there's a lot of little bits in that I thought would catch your attention. Oh, yeah, definitely.
So myconids are these basically mushroom people. If you've played Baldur's Gate 3, there's a whole section in them just now. And I think they're great because they use telepathy and their spores to sort of communicate, but also communicate through emotions and stuff like that, and like almost sending images and stuff like that. I love stuff because I'm very much, I'm sure you're the same. I'm a big fan of like GM scenes where players aren't involved. I am going to talk. Let me do my little bits. Then like encouraging that idea of like, when people do insight checks, it's not just what they say, it's what they feel and stuff like that. And one thing I thought was really cool about that particular encounter, and this idea of like, okay, you meet some myconids, the spores, they affect you for as long as you're in the caves, maybe an hour or so afterwards, but you can feel what your other party members are feeling.
Yes.
And encouraging that role play. It's like, why is the cleric very sad? Or like you getting these emotions just off the top. And I just thought that was really cool. And again, it's something else you twist into as players, getting them excited to play and go one beyond their character sheets, like asking the other player, why are you sad? Like even if it's as blunt a question as that,
I love the role play opportunities that specifically come from, I think they're called rapport spores, which I thought was very funny. But I love the idea of that, because I just imagine like a team of players collecting some of these spores, realizing that they last an hour, and then using them to like give themselves a little psychic advantage in the future. They're like, ooh, let's bust out these spores so that we can psychically talk to one another.
Yes.
Because anyone infected is able to speak with anyone else affected for an hour. So like you could use that in such interesting ways as players. I would love to it was so good.
Yeah, rapport spores and this idea of just stress spores as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think ultimately, if I was running this particular one, I would make it ambiguous, because myconids are supposed to be scary. Like they're human-sized mushroom, like fungi.
They have little heart mushrooms.
Yeah,
the human heart mushrooms. Yeah.
Gross.
Love it.
Like you could go proper into the detail and stuff, and these things moving slowly, but also is it up to the players to be like, because like you could easily make it into a big combat, and you're like, like it does say like, if they do kill off some myconids, and that's okay. The person who sent you on the mission is sad, but like it's like understands like you had to do it because they'd lost their senses because of this venting sort of smoke that was happening below the isle. Again, if it was me being a cruel person who loves horror, I would definitely make it ambiguous as whether or not they had been very much influenced by this thing, and if they turn evil in quotation marks, or they just lose their senses, and then if the players can work out what's going on. But again, maybe not so much for like beginner players who might be like, oh, morality, no, I didn't read to be a bad person. But I don't know, it's a slippery slope. As soon as someone goes, wait, we'll just kill them, great. And then they're like, money, great. So I think it depends on what you want to get out of the game, right? If you want to encourage people to be like, hey, storytelling's really cool, and like we can really build up cool collaborative like tales together, or we're going to video game this, we're going to do X, Y, Z and use milestone leveling and XP leveling, sorry.
On the note of combat options versus story options, so I took notes as I was reading through this. I just had the thought of like, there's a quote where it says, in the meantime, she finds comfort in helping humans and other people escape from cycles of violence. It was about Runara, the dragon.
Yes.
And I had a note under that said, there better be ways to avoid combat. And I paid attention to that as I went along. Every section that I can think of explicitly mentions a non-combat solution, with the exception, I think, of like the zombies returning.
Yes.
So the first time you see them, you have to like, you can potentially just leave them.
Run away,
the second time you see them, it assumes that you're going to fight them. Now, obviously a clever player and a clever GM can come up with other options, but I appreciate that over and over again in this book, it will say like, you can stealth your way, you can swim, you can get these two people to argue rather than you having to fight them. You can, make some sort of good relation with the Myconids. I guess there's the little snaky thing at the end of the Myconid thing, which you would have to fight.
Yeah.
But generally, like all of the sentient creatures, you have a non-combat option.
Yeah.
Which I like.
Question back to you then with your podcast. Like, obviously, I know it's usually 1 versus 1. Like, I assume you have conflict, obviously, and fighting and stuff like that. How often would you say your players in the world you create, I appreciate it's very different to this, go for the combat option? Or are they playing smart and go, well, I am only one person, so I better talk my way out of it, you know what I mean?
I feel like the thought of like, well, I'm only one person has only come up a couple of times, because generally people do end up befriending NPC without me needing to like insert one specifically for them. They end up finding somebody that they're like, I like this person. It makes sense for them to come with me right now. And then when the combat comes around, they can do that. I would say in 100 episodes, I think that there are only, I did the math at one point. There's not a lot of episodes that actually have combat,
like all in out brawls or anything like that.
All in out brawls, like and generally the way I play it, the way I always recommend playing any combat is that like very few people are going to fight to the death.
Yes,
right. That's another thing that happens in this. That Spark Render, they make a point that when he gets down to like 10% of his health or whatever, he will flee,
get out of there.
But then they say later, no, at this point, if you fight him at this point, he is too invested and he will fight to the death. And I liked them making that point, because if you say one person is willing to fight to the death, that does imply most other sentients won't.
In most of the games that you've run, it sounds like most people go for not the passive option, but will look for alternate non-combat options.
Yeah.
The point I was going to make on that was that I think it's very interesting. In the last couple of years, I know there's been this big drive because of stuff like Critical Role and other streaming platforms where people they're not fussed about the big combats. Like, they're exciting cinematic pieces, but it's not every session. Like Dimension 20 is great for it. Like the earlier seasons, like it's always like the first episode is social, and then one combat episode, a social episode, a combat episode, and so it breaks it up like that, so it's easy streaming. And I think more people now are like interested in games which are more storytelling and getting over that fear of like, oh, I'm not an actor or I'm not an improviser, and it's just enjoying it and not having to worry about like, I've rolled a D12 instead of a D20, you know what I mean? So I think it's interesting you say that there is non-combat options. It's not as, I don't think they advertise it at all, that there are non-combat actions compared to, say, Wild Beyond the Witchlight was one of their sort of the Feywild one that came out of the Carnival, and they made a big thing about like, oh, you don't have to fight anything in this particular adventure. What I discovered when I read it with my friend Emily is that Emily pointed out, it's like, well, you don't have to fight anything, but you get pushed over quite a bit. The hags win, etc. So you do have to stand up and fight at certain points. So I think this is interesting that, like you said, there's lots of different options that make it easy for the GM and for players to be like, well, hang on, I don't want to, I don't see a way forward. And, well, you can always run, you can always use, and I think it just encourages the GM to explore those options. Whereas in the past, maybe they were like, well, this is a fighting game, but you have to, like, again with Phandelver, there's the big dungeon at the end. You go and I have to kill the BBG, like, because they're about to bring the whole of Phandelver down. In
a lot of D&D stuff that I have read, that I remember reading years ago, because I haven't read many adventures recently.
Sure.
I mostly listen to people talking about the adventures.
What?
But it felt like I was listening to I was reading a adventure for a combat game.
Mm-hmm.
This felt like reading an adventure for a combat game that knows that some people are going to play it another way.
Yeah.
It is definitely not catering to people that don't like combat.
Mm-hmm.
It is catering to people that want combat, but it's acknowledging that you could do something else.
Yeah, and you won't be disadvantaged if you don't. Like, it's not like you're doing the killed all these creatures. Okay, so for each creature, that's that's 500 XP. It's not doing that. It's like once you've finished this bit of the mission, everyone gets 500 XP. Depending on, it doesn't matter. As long as everyone does it together, that's fine. It doesn't matter how you got there. Is there a bit of this particular starter set you're like, I really, really love this, and there's a bit of the adventure or the starter set you're like, nah, sod this, not at all.
Boy, I had a one thing that was ready to go as like a thing that I liked, which was the myconid rapport spores. Yes. We've already done that, so let me go to the one that I didn't particularly care for. I remember reading the section on NPCs, and it has Runara, who looks human but is a dragon. Then it has, unless I'm mistaken, like 3 or 4 named NPCs with really fleshed out backstories that can give you quests and whatever. They're all human as well. And then the rest of the town and the rest of the named NPCs, besides the dragon that you fight at the end, they are all kobolds.
Yes.
And they don't have quests for you.
I know.
They don't have fleshed out backstories. They do have some good ones and some bad ones. So it's not all like they're all cannon fodder. There is a little bit of like complexity, but it bummed me out that I was just like, oh, you want kobolds? You want a bunch of kobolds? Well, we're not going to give you a single one with a fleshed out backstory.
Yes.
Like, it'd be fine if there were no NPCs with fleshed out backstories, but there's a bunch and they're all human.
Yes, Tarak and Varnoth. Yeah, the two. Yeah, I said really interesting. Like we've got a hidden past. We won't talk about it, but they are both human. And when you consider that, we've got a dwarven fighter and half elf, and so we've got the diversity of lineage in the characters.
The players, the player.
It would be cool to have more, because kobolds are fun. I love having kobolds. There's 7 of them. And I'm like, are there supposed to be like, I don't know, 7 dwarves or play on that? And it does say that you don't need to bring them all to life. But I'm like,
oh, is that really what it is? There are the 7 dwarves? Oh, I missed that.
No, sorry. There's 9 of them. I've just realized. I was counting them quickly. They've got enough like quirks to bring them alive. But you're right. They don't, other than like, I'm here, I'm a bit silly. That's kind of it. And I kind of wish, again, kobolds I think they get a bit of a bad rep because of the sort of history about like they're always in service to dragons, they're always a bit cowardly, etc. But I feel like you could play these really useful, that could be like, one of them got lost in the cove, you have to go find them, and because they went to go and save the town and they knew something was wrong with the myconids and stuff like that. So yeah, I think giving them a bit more to do rather than just be like, we're silly, we're going to be silly, and you have a silly encounter with us, and that's it. Yeah, but give them a bit more of a rounded character for sure.
So as far as you had asked, what's like something that I particularly liked from this adventure, I am very, very glad that they had shipwrecks, that they actually did do that actually happened. And I love that the maps that they provide for that, and they explicitly say this, if you ever need a shipwreck in any of your campaigns, just throw this map in there and like change what's on it, change what's around it. I think that's great. I think that the flavor of it, it was exactly just, this is a shipwreck. This is what it is. I mean, maybe that's a low bar. I don't know. but I thought it did that very well. And that was all that I wanted from that.
I kind of wish there was more kind of shipwrecks that you could explore. Like, not like 5 or 6, but like 1 or 2 that you would find, I don't know, clues or some more magic items and stuff like that. Yeah, I agree. I think if it's in the title of the adventure, you got to see, dragons, a storm, and a wreck,
Now that you say that, my mind immediately goes, why wasn't there another? Why wasn't there at least one example of another ship? They give you the one that's related to the plot. Mm-hmm. And they say, if your people explore others, there won't be anything like related to the plot. But like, here's some, you can just reuse this map and plop whatever you want on there, which does. Yeah. Now that you say it
again, it just might be like, again, if you're just doing like a one contained session, it might be fine. But if they're like, oh, that was really fun. But if there must be more wrecks around here. And then you're like, oh God. So one thing I do love about Wizard of the Coast, in some of their books, they do these random tables. I think a random table of 2 of like, here's the name of a ship that's been wrecked. Here's the treasure that's on it. And a mystery that you could find. There's a siren on it.
Yeah.
Or a ghost of the captain who knows more about the isle itself, etc., and has unfinished business.
Oh, that'd be a great way to give more lore about this. That's great. Yeah. Of course.
It doesn't have to be too much. And I guess it's tricky because I just feel anything that's when you have to do on the sea, like they had like Salt Marsh was a book that came out this and I really like that idea of like, pirates and stuff like that, because it's just something different. You always have new locations and obviously politics. And so you're right before, like you have this island in the middle of it and then you could just expand out to like the seas and just go from there and have your own like sort of Sea of Thieves thing. I'll tell you what my favorite bit about this campaign. I quite like the additional encounters.
Well, I don't know if I saw this.
It's right at the beginning in chapter 1, and it's right at the end. Like there's like cloister quests, individual quests, and then exploring the island. And this is where the additional quests are. So there's 4 of them. So so you have one about kobolds. You've got one about you mentioned the dragon that's under the island. One of them is just Hot Springs Havoc, where there's a hot spring.
I did see this. Okay.
Yeah. And it's just this idea of like, a nice little springs, you get temporary hit points, but it connects to that whole thing about this hot springs is actually, it's a place where a brass dragon died. And that's where the magic comes from. And I think I would love to see more mini locations that you could explore on the island that could be random encounters, etc., which then were connected with the magic of the dragons that were here. Like, so I just like that idea of like, the fire, the magic of this thing made this hot springs, and then you're sort of warmed by it. There's an owlbear encounter. There always has to be an owlbear somewhere,
I was thinking that when I was listening to the episode with the other starter set, and you guys mentioned owlbear, I was like, oh, they really. Oh, I did not realize exactly how much of a mascot the owlbear is, but of course.
Yeah, again, this particular owlbear, again, I quite like it because it's not as passive as the last one was. This idea of like, it's aggressive, it's territorial, but it has like a whistle around its neck. So if you manage to get, it's your pet as a result. And I just, again, there are many little encounters which I think could be really evocative, and you can remember that adventure as a result.
It says in the description, owlbear was originally was stranded here after a performing troupe got stranded. That's a ship, right?
Yeah.
You go to a ship with a bunch of like stuff from a circus or whatever. You fight the zombie of a clown.
My God. There's the horror there.
Yes.
No, thank you. Oh, but you can build so much on this. So I think one thing I definitely take away from this starter set is that I think it's a good one, accessible. Sure, I think more accessible than the previous starter set. Is it as exciting? Is it as different? I think it's fine. Would I run it, for example? I don't think I would without a lot of changes to make it more interesting. Like I said, that get that ritual at the top. That's the exciting thing. Leave more clues like that. I think it's a good one if you are brand new to D&D and you're trying to get, like you said, you were saying before that you ran a one-shot for your family at Christmas. If you did this as a holiday, you get Thanksgiving, 4th of July, whatever, you sit people down and go, okay, we're all here. Let's do half a day's worth of D&D, and then you get through like a couple of sessions and you're like, that's it, done. And then I guess getting people excited to play with each other, I think that's the sort of goal of this particular stuff. So I don't mind it as a result.
Again, it's been ages and ages since I played Lost Mines of Phandelver myself, but that feels like a first mini campaign, or first campaign, even not even mini campaign, but first campaign that you 10 years later look back at it and think, oh, the adventures I had.
Yeah.
This feels like, oh yeah, that was that fun game that we played before we got into our own thing. Does that make it a better starter set? Possibly,
yeah. Each to their own, isn't it? It's like, yeah, pros and cons of both of them. Well, there you go. Well, thank you so much, Ty, for joining me on my starter set quest to complete them all. I very much appreciate it. Let the listeners know, where can we find you? What projects have you got coming up? And where can we find you on social media?
Yes. So first of all, look for me at sidecharacterquest.com. It's a website that we set up last year. It's got tons of really good art from our show, and it also links to our social media. Right now, we're still on Twitter for whatever reason. I don't know
how long. Yeah, we're all on there.
But SCQ Podcast on Twitter, or for myself, Win Lose Tie. That's TY. And as for projects that I'm working on right now, I don't remember the exact date of it, but in August, I'm going to start airing episode 101 to 108, an 8-episode quest on Side Character Quest, starring Joshua Lorimer, who listeners may know from Sneak Attack from Titans of Altera, a couple of early and awesome old actual play shows. It's a really, really good. I don't like to hype myself up.
It's really good.
Yeah. It's a very great quest that he came on. Like I said, 8 episodes. I designed it from the ground up to be rewarding for people that have been longtime listeners, but also to be a wonderful introduction to the show for new people. And if you bail, it stands alone. It can be, but there's all these little tidbits that'll be like, ooh, maybe I want to go check out those old episodes. So yeah, Side Character Quest on all of your podcast things. Go to sidecharacterquest.com to see the cool art, listen to a trailer.
I was just looking at my pile because I have a little bit of the art. You sent me a postcard of
oh yay!
Yeah, I've kept it because I was going to put it on my wall and stuff. Your sister does the art, doesn't she?
So my sister does the art. She did. You're holding up a postcard of a beautiful bird artwork that she did in watercolor.
Gorgeous.
The art on the website is inspired by Charlie Harper, who is an older sort of a flat, very graphic art designer, and she did an amazing job sort of pulling from that inspiration and bringing all of the characters in the world to life. It's so beautiful. It's so gorgeous.
Yeah.
Please check it out.
Yeah, please check it out.
So for the last year or so, starting in spring of 2023, I went to a local game shop in the area that I used to live. I used to live in Philadelphia. I went to Philadelphia Game Shop, and the experience of doing just a drop-in game, a drop-in campaign with strangers that I'd never met before. It was very low pressure. You just pop in, say hi, make your character, have a good time.
Yeah.
I stuck around for a whole year. It was a wonderful experience. Basically what I'm saying is, if you haven't gotten to play a TTRPG in a while, look up what is available in your area. Go check it out. Join like a drop-in, like a TTRPG book club. I have actually seen multiple in various cities. They are around. Just put yourself out there and have a wonderful time. Play games.
Play games, absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. If you're worried about your friends aren't free or available to play, absolutely go into a game store. And if they have a regular TTRPG night, or I know in the UK we have stuff like Meetup. I'm sure there's similar things in the US where you could do the same thing. So to check those out. Well, brilliant. You probably can't hear this time, but there's a massive thunderstorm happening outside.
I was wondering what that sound was. I could hear occasional crashes, and I assumed
it literally just come over. So I better just end the call now in case I get swept away by the rain. But thank you so much, listeners, for listening to this week's DMBC. Ty, thank you so much. We'll bring you back on absolutely ASAP to talk more about maybe other things other than D&D, or maybe D&D adjacent to get there. And I can't wait to. Well, congrats on the new launch of Side Character Quest. I'm very excited for you. And you absolutely got to be your own hype person because no one else is going to be.
Yeah.
So. Thank you so much.
Thank you.